Well, let's talk about some week 3 waiver wire targets. Obviously, another quarterback was just opened up with Andy Dalton, and maybe you're in a 2 quarterback league, maybe you're in a deep league, whatever the case. Maybe you somehow were relying on Bryce Young. You need some pickups. I wrote down 3. I could throw in a 4th, but I have Derek Carr. Obviously, he's laying the world on fire. That Saints offensive line is so good, and it's opening up a lot of downfield shots. Derek Carr is hitting them, and he needs to be owned, and he probably needs to be played. Number 2 is Geno Smith. Pretty big downgrade from Carr to Smith, in my personal opinion. But Geno's got weapons all over the field. Geno's been playing pretty well. Week 1, he had a big run that certainly helped him, a big touchdown run. But Geno Smith is outperforming a lot of players right now. And I think if you are starting Matthew Stafford or somebody like that, got to think pretty hard about Geno Smith. I think that's not necessarily a downgrade. And then Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold played well against the 49ers. And Justin Jefferson, I don't expect to miss time. Jordan Addison should be back pretty soon. A couple more weeks after that, TJ Hawkinson could be back. Sam Darnold's playing in a very good offensive scheme. You have to deliver the ball on time, need to know where to go with the ball, and it seems like Sam Darnold is capable of doing that. So I think he is a good quarterback pickup. And Ryan, you do not need to apologize. Dynasty Superflex, send DJ Moore for Godwin. Yeah, I think so. Keep trade cut says DJ Moore side wins, but Godwin and Baker are cooking. I mean, I said this before week 1. Godwin of this year is completely different from Godwin from last year. They kept having whatever to play Chris Godwin outside a lot last year, and he just wasn't very good. This year, he is back in the slot, and he is cooking, and he is looking exactly like the Chris Godwin of old. I think perceived value for Dynasty, I do think DJ Moore still has more perceived value. So when I say that, I think I'd prefer to have Chris Godwin, but I also think that could mean you could get a draft pick swap if that helps you. You know that guy's team better than yours. Maybe you can get a late round draft pick thrown in. Whatever the case, I think you could get a little bit more, but even still, I like it. If that person's willing to do that trade, DJ Moore for Chris Godwin, then that means they think they won. It's position for position. So that's a weird one. So if they already, they think they won. They think they got the better side of that deal because even position, same position. So you should be able to get something little that benefits you so that in their mind, it's still relatively even. You know what I mean? So I would ask for a little more. Should I pick up Hunter Henry or Quentin Johnston? Saying Laporta is your tight end and BTJ is your flex. I would pick up. I mean, I love Laporta still, so I'm not worried about Laporta. I think Hunter Henry could end up having the more consistent, fine role, though. We just talked about Quentin Johnston's schedule, I believe. That's the person I read off with. Oh, no, I think I read off the Rams. Yeah. Rams got Niners, Steelers, bye. Who does? Let's see here. Now I forgot who I'm looking up. Who do the Chargers play the next few weeks? I think that is relevant. They have Steelers, Chiefs bye. I think I did look that up. I think I'd go Hunter Henry. I think it's close, but I think I'd go Hunter Henry, especially if it's a fab league. I think you can get him for cheaper than Quentin Johnston. I think people are going to overreact to that. And Shaheed is still on waivers for Nino. Love that. For sure drop Deontay for him, or will Dalton wait on? I'd for sure drop Deontay Johnson for him. I think Deontay Johnson could end up being his ceiling with great quarterback play, Deontay Johnson, is pretty good targets, pretty good receptions, high yardage, no touchdowns, right? Like he's just not even a touchdown guy. And Shaheed is the deep threat. He is the guy who's cooking right now. He is the wide receiver 2. I'm going Rashid Shaheed. Fuck it. I think Deontay Johnson very clearly gets better, but I don't think he gets more consistently better than Rashid Shaheed. Okay, running back pickups. There's a lot. Not all of them are must pickups. A lot of them are situational. But these are all guys who are owned in less than 60% of sleeper fantasy leagues. So I just plugged them in here. So both of the Chiefs guys. So we're talking Carson Steele, Samaje Perine. I think they're both very much worth a pickup. I think they're both going to have value. Again, Carson Steele, if he plays well, doesn't fumble the football, he can certainly be an RB2 with upside. And I think Samaje Perine is a flex. Braylon Allen, Wisconsin Badger fan here. So very familiar with Braylon Allen. He's a very good football player, and he's playing really well for the Jets. I don't think he's going to have consistent standalone value, but if something happens to Breece Hall, I think Braylon Allen's going to cook. So Breece Hall owners absolutely need to own him. And even if you're not, if you have an open roster spot, deep league, check out Braylon Allen. Antonio Gibson, I don't know how that is how his week 2 performance is going to be consistent. But if you have an open roster spot, pick him up and see if he can somehow do that. Like, I think he's the receiving back, but he ran pretty damn well. So yeah, worth a look there. Ty Chandler, kind of similar to Braylon Allen. Ty Chandler, clearly the handcuff to Aaron Jones. I think he only ended up playing about a third of the snaps this week, but he played extremely well. Obviously a big fantasy day. So go pick up Ty Chandler. And if you're an Aaron Jones owner, he's a must own. If you are having all these running back injuries and just trying to get by right now, Chuba Hubbard is still the majority leader in that Panthers backfield. I think that offense gets better, which means they're going to be in scoring position more often. Chuba Hubbard becomes a better fantasy asset then. He dropped below the 60% ownership mark on sleeper fantasy at least. So definitely go check and see if someone dropped him in your league because he is still usable for a couple of weeks here. Dameon Pierce, again, he was out last night with a hamstring injury. Joe Mixon, I think, is going to miss at least a week. So someone needs to get the ball there. Dameon Pierce is probably the first one up. If he is not healthy, then it's Cam Akers. Both of those guys certainly warrant picking up in deep leagues. And then same thing as last week, Bucky Irving. If you're a Rashad White owner, you need to have Bucky Irving. If you're not a Rashad White owner, you see Rashad White's got a groin injury. If he is super ineffective next week, which is very possible with a groin injury, then we will be seeing Bucky Irving a lot more. Hunter, you can save your first waiver. Yeah, I would probably save it then. Hunter Henry, Quentin Johnston are not worth burning that. Okay, receivers I wrote down quickly. We talked about a bunch of these guys already. Rashid Shaheed, still owned unless it's 60%. Go pick him up. Jalen Naylor, we'll see. Obviously, he is just relevant until Jordan Addison comes back, but he had a good game this week. Definitely go pick him up. Jalen Tolbert, Cowboys media has talked about how big of an offseason he had. So week 1, I was pretty high on him. Really disappointing. Week 2, though, I think he got like 9 or 8 targets, played extremely well. It looked like what the Cowboys media has been talking about. So I think he is very interesting. Brandon Cooks is also below the 60% mark. He played the most snaps, I believe, of any Cowboys wide receiver. Both of them need to be owned. Jalen Tolbert's the more interesting option to me, though. Demarcus Robinson, he has a pretty good role, even if Cooper Kupp is playing because Puka Nacua is out. But if Puka and Kupp are both out, Demarcus Robinson needs to be owned even with the matchups coming up, which is tough. I believe they have the they have the Niners for sure. Then I believe the Steelers and then a bye week. So very, very possible that the Rams keep Cooper Kupp out the next 3 weeks because it's only 2 games. Could get Demarcus Robinson as a wide receiver 1 in both of those games. And then a quiet pickup that I can't believe he's this unowned, but he's very, very unowned. Josh Downs, he was about 50-50 to play this week. Very possible Josh Downs comes back next week. Even more possible he's back by week 4. And he's a very, very, very good player. He's an easy throw for Anthony Richardson. He can get open. He can create his own space. It's nice to have a player who can create their own jump shot. Josh Downs can create his own space. And he is going to be a fantasy asset, especially in PPR, I think. And that's why I'm not I like Alec Pierce as a player. I'm glad he's finally panning out. People like that, Doolin there, they're going to lose their value, I think, when Josh Downs comes back. Any reason to panic on Evan Engram or even the Jags themselves? Certainly reason to panic on the Jags. I picked this team to finish last in the division. I think I was overreacting a little bit, but this is not a good football team. Trevor Lawrence is not the guy. Their defense is not overly great. It's not bad, but it is average at best. With Trevor Lawrence not being the guy, offensive line not being that good, and now you got injuries. Yes, reason to panic on the Jags for sure. For Evan Engram, it's a hamstring that he hurt pregame. That sucks. There's certainly always reason to be worried about a fantasy player whose value depends on their athleticism, and it's a hamstring injury. So, yes, reason to panic. Obviously, if Evan Engram misses more time, Brenton Strange is the guy to own there, and he's a great player too. And if he continues to play very well, I mean, he's going to split time with Evan Engram. They're not just going to go back to sole Engram. So yes, if yes, you can panic on Evan Engram as well. I think his days as a clear top 10 fantasy tight end option could be done. Could be done. I'm not saying they are done. I'm not saying he's not valuable anymore. But if you can get someone to trade for him at relatively Evan Engram value, preseason Evan Engram value, go ahead and do that. And speaking of tight ends, 4 tight ends I wrote down for pickups. Hunter Henry said it preseason. This is going to be a guy we're going to talk about. He had a very good week 2. Not a good week 1, so we'll see how he's used week to week there. But Hunter Henry needs to be owned, especially with Jacoby Brissett as the quarterback. Number 2, Mike Gesicki. He has been moved around a lot in the Bengals offense, especially with T. Higgins out. But he's looked really, really good. And even Eric All, I think, played about half the snaps for the Bengals and looked all right. But Mike Gesicki needs to be owned at the current moment, especially if T. Higgins misses more time. Number 3, Colby Parkinson. He still has a couple of weeks before Tyler Higbee comes back. And if Kupp and Puka are both out next week, Colby Parkinson could be getting a decent amount of targets. So I like that. And then number 4, talked about in week 1, talking about it now. Zach Ertz is the tight end 1 in a Cliff Kingsbury system that he knows very well. He is going to be very fantasy relevant, and he's going to put together a lot more games like he did this week, which is flirting with, double-digit fantasy points. If he gets the touchdown, it's a great fantasy week. If he doesn't get the touchdown, he doesn't lose you the matchup. So certainly worth checking him out if you have an Evan Engram, if you have a Travis Kelce and you're super worried. Zach Ertz is pretty reliable until he gets hurt, I think. Should I pick up Carr? I got Burrow, so I don't know if it's worth a spot. Who do the Bengals play this week? Well, who do both play, actually? Obviously, I haven't done my rankings yet for this upcoming week, but let's see. Derek Carr plays Philadelphia, so somewhat of a short week, I suppose. And Burrow plays Washington at home. Next 2 weeks, we're talking the Bengals get Washington and they get Carolina. Then they have Baltimore, then they have the Giants. So I think this is a perfect time for the Bengals to wake up a little bit. It fully depends on who you're dropping for him. If you have an empty roster spot, I think Derek Carr is worth being owned. We talked about that. I think he's good. I think he's going to continue to play pretty well. But I think you're starting Burrow this week over Derek Carr. So if you don't want to waste a roster spot and drop somebody valuable for someone you're not going to start, okay. If you want to pick him up for insurance or pick him up as trade bait for somebody, that makes sense as well. If there's someone who's super quarterback needy, who's going to be, needing a quarterback, obviously, maybe, and they have someone who you really want, maybe you pick up Carr so you can package Carr with another player to upgrade. You have 2 on the bench, so might as well. That's a more interesting question, I think. Do you drop Tua for Tua for Derek Carr. And that's a very real, like I'm in that situation as well in one league. In another league, like I said, it's a 16 team. I mean, how is this for a fucking disaster? In a 16 team league, I have Tua as my starting quarterback, backup quarterback, Will Levis. So I'm going for Andy Dalton, I think. Issues there. But if you're in a normal 10 or 12, Tua's on your bench, Derek Carr is there. I would try to trade Tua quickly to see if somebody wants him. And maybe he goes on IR so you can put him in an IR slot. But I might go Derek Carr. That's a really tough one. I think I might pick up Derek Carr over Tua. Because it's not like Tua was ripped out of our lives off the back of a 5 touchdown game and he's looked so good, right? That hasn't been the case either. So are we saying Tua's marbles got rocked and now all of a sudden the juices are flowing? He can see football fields again? Yeah, I'd pick up Derek Carr. Try to trade him first, though. Defenses that you can stream this week that are very unowned. So very good ones, I think, that are unowned. We got the Raiders are playing their home opener. So crazy Raider fans are going to be there off the back of a win. They play the Panthers. I liked this before Bryce Young was out. However, I am still okay playing a whole home opener for the Raiders against Andy Dalton. I think you can do that still. Because, I mean, they're going to get after Andy Dalton, to be honest. This maybe was a move of safety for Bryce Young. I'm not ruling it out that we don't see Bryce Young in this game after Andy Dalton gets hurt because he is going to be under duress. Number 2, Bengals versus Washington. Bengals are also home. They were, not a good week 1, and then week 2 they played the Chiefs. So a ton of people dropped the Bengals. I don't think this is like a top 5 defensive play, but I think it's a pretty darn good one for a team that's relatively unowned. Bengals versus Washington. You're not really that afraid of Jaden Daniels right now, so I like that one. And then number 3, we got the Packers, who are leading the league in turnovers. They are doing very well at that. Defense isn't great, but they are playing fast. They're playing pretty good, actually. They're not great, but they're forcing turnovers. They play at Tennessee. So we have seen Will Levis do too many Will Levis things this season. We got his coach saying, "What the fuck are you doing?" And then saying at the press conference, like, "Yeah, you saw what I said." So Will Levis stinks. Let's be honest about that. Titans offensive line is good. Titans receivers are okay. Will Levis stinks. Play the Packers. Packers are going to get at least 1 turnover, and I don't think the Titans are going to rack up the scoreboard. They're not going to light it up. So those are 3 streamers for week 3. There's obvious other good plays, but for defenses that you can pick up right now, that is it. And yeah, the dynamic duo of Tua and Levis, it is a shit show at quarterback for that league.